Hey y'all, I'm Bud Elliott, and this is Cover 3 College Football Summer School. We've done our research on the teams, and now we're bringing on the top team experts from the 24/7 Sports Network to help us fill in the blanks. Please follow us on Twitter at Cover 3 Podcast. That's Cover 3 Podcast. And leave us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. All right, class is in session. Hey guys, I'm Bud Elliott, and welcome back into College Football Summer School, part of the Cover 3 College Football Podcast. And today, we're talking a little Colorado, and I'm joined by Adam Munsterteiger, nailed it, I think, of BuffStampede. They do a great job covering all things Colorado, and if you are a Colorado fan or just somebody interested in the Colorado program, you really need to watch this episode, and you need to go to BuffStampede.com just to check it out, because they have had an absolute just ton of player turnover. And Adam's here to help us. Man, Adam, I'm really glad you're here, because I don't know what to make of this team.
Yeah, it was quite a hectic stretch there after the season, because it was a couple guys hitting the portal every day. And that number, I think if you include Curtis Appleton, who was awarded a scholarship last year, it was 23 players left the program between the start of the 2021 season and then when they started the spring semester in 2022. A lot of guys left, but a lot of that was guys kind of being pushed out. They needed to make room, like a lot of programs were dealing with across the country. There was kind of this logjam because eligibility didn't count in 2020, and they had signed a full recruiting class. So you're going to have to make room for those guys. And then you wanted to bring in some transfers yourself to kind of fill in some depth issues. So 7 of those guys that left the program ended up transferring to other Power 5 programs. So those are really the 7 guys that you would kind of focus on as far as impact to the Colorado football program. And you start with Christian Gonzalez. He has a chance to work his way into being a first-round NFL draft pick. He was their top pro prospect, their best cornerback, and he goes to Oregon. So that loss hurts. You do have some young guys you like at that position. So that wasn't necessarily the position that was affected the most negatively. I think you would probably maybe look a little bit more to receiver, where a guy like Brennan Rice was one of the few guys that when you tuned in to watch a Colorado football game in 2021, he was out there battling on offense, and it was one of the worst offensive units in the country. And that was a guy that also added some explosiveness as a kickoff returner. So you hated to see him leave, and then it kind of made it, even worse when he goes to a division rival in USC. So they did bring in RJ Sneed from Baylor. So that helps there. RJ Sneed led Baylor in receiving 2 years ago, was second on the team last year. So that kind of helps mitigate that loss a little bit, but you only get RJ Sneed for 1 year. Brennan Rice is a little bit younger in his career. So those are a couple of the big guys leaving that did hurt this program that you would have liked to have back in 2022.
Who are some of the guys coming in that we should be most excited about?
Well, in terms of transfers coming in, I think for the future, you kind of look to Maddox Kopp, a quarterback coming in, that he's not going to play this year, but he really looks the part. He's probably going to be their third-string quarterback this year, a guy that down the road is going to have a big impact. In terms of 2022, you look to Tommy Brown transferring in as an offensive lineman from Alabama. He actually started a game for Alabama last year. It maybe wasn't going to be a full-time starter for the Crimson Tide going forward, but is a guy that they factored in right at left guard right away. Kari Kutch, who is a veteran guy that graduated at that position, moves on, and you plug in Tommy Brown there, and he's going to be a starter for them up front. I mentioned RJ Sneed, a guy that brings a veteran presence at the receiver position. They took a chance on a guy named Chance Main. He played at Incarnate Word a couple years ago, didn't play last year, coming back from a back surgery, and actually came on campus this spring and was factoring in with the ones at the end of spring ball off the edge. So a guy that they feel pretty good about. And then lastly, in terms of the guys bringing in that are going to have a big impact, you got to talk about Rahman Jefferson, who was a second-team FCS All-American at Sam Houston last year. Really, really good running back that if you want to watch some good tape, some entertaining tape, watch his film from Sam Houston last year. We get into the second level and just was a hard guy to bring down and put up huge stats there. So with Jarek Broussard, another guy I should have mentioned in terms of the guys that it hurts losing, he's going to Michigan State. You plug in Rahman Jefferson this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's a 1,000-yard back for the Buffs this year. So those are the main guys that are they're going to have an impact from the transfer portal coming into Boulder.
What spots on this team would you project to take the biggest leaps forward now under yet another year of Karl Dorrell?
In terms of units or players?
Preferably units.
Well, they desperately need the quarterback position and the offensive line groups to get better. And, I guess the bright side there was that it can't get much worse than it was in 2021. Brandon Lewis was a first-year starter in the Pac-12, and those growing pains, they were tough. He did not grow at the rapid pace that they were hoping for. And he did get better at times, but still, even late in the season, his stat lines were not good. But part of that issue was the fact he didn't get much time back in the pocket. The offensive line group was an unmitigated disaster in 2021. They actually fired their offensive line coach 7 weeks into the season, which you just don't see happen all that often unless there's some kind of off-the-field issue. So that was a group that did not like their position coach, and they have a new position coach that they like now. Kyle Devan takes over. He's got previous Power 5 offensive line coaching experience at Arizona. He was an offensive analyst for Michigan, helping out with their offensive line group last year. That was a really good group. Now, we'll see what that group looks like. I mentioned Tobby Brown transferring in from Alabama. He fills one of the gaps in terms of guys that they lost on that offensive line group. Frank Phillip at right tackle was pretty good in 2020, was not the same version of himself in 2021, coming back from a shoulder injury. Casey Roddick, who is their right guard, probably their best offensive lineman this spring, had no offseason last year. He had COVID and a heart issue as a result of that. And so he was not cleared until right when camp started. So he was playing his way back into shape even early in the season. So there was reasons for why that offensive line struggled last year. They have to be better this year just because of the simple fact that it can't get any worse. And then going back to the quarterback position, JT Shroud, a Tennessee transfer, was probably going to be their starting quarterback until during their first preseason scrimmage. He suffered a torn ACL. So at that point, Brennan Lewis was given the job. Up to that point, I thought Shroud was probably the odds-on favorite to be the starting quarterback. He wasn't cleared for full participation this spring, but did 7-on-7 stuff and is going to be a full participant when they get back for summer. So I think right now, if you're going to pick a starter, just going off the fact that Shroud was probably going to be the guy before he tore that ACL, he has a lot of arm talent. He did start a game at Tennessee before transferring to Colorado. So you'd expect those units to get better. But again, the bar is set really low from what they did in 2021.
I also feel like just, looking at the depth chart, reading y'all's reports, at least the starters on the defensive line have a chance to, with another year of experience, be even better and maybe be a top half unit in Pac-12.
Yeah, I think the front, if you're going to look to a strength for Colorado, you'd probably look there. Terrence Lang is a first off the bus type of guy that has had flashes of being a really good player, just hasn't had the consistency behind that. He looked like it early on during spring ball. He looked like a star in that group as a defensive end. He did miss the last 2 weeks of spring ball with a lower body injury. He was kind of moving around with a walking boot, but we're told it's nothing that needs surgery. So he's a guy that's going to hopefully, if you're a Colorado fan, take a jump up this year and be in the all-conference discussion. Naeem Rodman's a steady defensive lineman that's gotten a little bit better every year he's been on campus. Jalen Sami is a junior, but it feels like he's been in this program for the last decade because he gray-shirted, then red-shirted, then COVID, didn't count against his eligibility. So he's been around for a really long time and is a big body, another all-bus type guy that is played a lot of football now for Colorado. And so they've had some backup defensive linemen kind of take a step up. Justin Jackson, who came in from the JUCO ranks a couple years ago. So, and then on the edge, they lose Carson Wells, who's off to the NFL, but Guy Thomas was playing up to Carson Wells' level early on last season before he got hurt. And they've got a lot of depth off the edge as well. So those groups on defense should be pretty solid, and kind of lost in the fact that, Colorado struggled so much offensively was the fact that defense was pretty solid for most of the season. They ranked 7th in the conference in points allowed. So there's still room for improvement there. But generally, week to week, aside from a couple games, the defense had this team playing to a level that they should have been a bowl team in 2021, but the offense just didn't score enough points. And so folks didn't really pay attention to the fact this defense was pretty solid at points. You look at what they did in week 2 against Texas A&M. They limited the Aggies to 10 points. And so that group played well at times last year.
Yeah, I mean, just look at my own numbers I keep. I had them 81st defensively and 121st offensively. So, yeah, 81st, if you get the right bounces, that you can get to a bowl with that. It's hard to get to a bowl with 121st moving the football. Last thing, and I'll get you out of here. I really appreciate the time here. We're talking to Adam Munsterteiger of BuffStampede here on the Cover 3 College Ball Podcast Summer School Series. This schedule is ridiculous. TCU, Air Force, Minnesota in the non-conference. Do I have that right?
Yeah, you do. And you should never schedule Air Force if you're a Power 5 football team. If they're in your conference and you have to play them, then fine. You deal with the difficulty of preparing for that offense on short notice. But when they played Air Force in Boulder a couple of years ago when Mel Tucker was a head coach, he had to dedicate a period every day in the preseason to preparing for Air Force's option offense. And so that's not a good team to have on your schedule because it's not a Power 5 opponent, yet it's a really difficult matchup. Now, Minnesota going on the road, that's going to be tough. And that's a Minnesota team that came into Boulder last year and shut them out. Now, they hired Minnesota's old offensive coordinator, their old tight ends coach. So they've got, I guess, a little bit more intel on the Golden Gophers. And I can't imagine they're going to get quite embarrassed the way they did against Minnesota in Boulder this past year. But, yeah, not an ideal schedule when you're as Karl Dorrell in year 3 really trying to find any wins you can on the schedule to keep some semblance of momentum with this program going in the right direction.
All right, guys, really appreciate Adam Munsterteiger of BuffStampede for joining us today. Learned a whole lot about Colorado, and we'll be sure to stay tuned to BuffStampede for more throughout the summer, see what else they do in the transfer portal, and maybe have Adam back on for a little season preview come the fall. All right, that's the bell. Cover 3 College Football Summer School is over for today, but don't worry. We'll be back soon with even more episodes filling you in on the top teams in college football. Please give us those 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Follow us on YouTube and on Twitter at Cover 3 Podcast, and we'll see y'all soon.